In 2013, I published The Power of Zero, in which I quoted former Comptroller General of the federal government, David Walker, as predicting that tax rates would have to double or our country would go bust. Yet here we are 10 years later in 2023, and not only have taxes not gone up, they're actually lower than they were when I first wrote the book. The highest marginal tax bracket over those 10 years went from 39.6 down to 37%. Was I disastrously off base in my prediction? Have I led my readers astray? How do we explain this lowering of tax rates when experts are predicting they have to go up? To answer this question, we have to ask another question. What was the consequence of the federal government not raising taxes back in 2013? Well, let's begin by looking at where the national debt was in 2013. It was right around 16 trillion. Now the national debt is 31 trillion. So one of the consequences of not raising taxes back then is that the national debt has basically doubled in the short stretch of just 10 years. How could the government get away with doubling the debt over that time frame? They could do it because ever since then we've been in a period of historically low interest rates. So they've been borrowing money on the cheap. And they did so out of political expediency. You see, politicians are much more likely to be thrown out of office by raising taxes than they are by adding to the national debt over time. After all, there's no immediate consequence for the taxpayer when politicians borrow money at historically low interest rates. But the question becomes, how much longer can politicians keep borrowing at this pace? The answer is not much longer. Here's why. Like I said, over the last 10 years, interest rates were practically zero. That meant that the cost of servicing the national debt has been eminently affordable. It was easy to throw things on the national credit card because there weren't immediate dire consequences for doing so. But two things have changed dramatically since 2013. First, interest rates are no longer near zero. They've climbed dramatically to counteract the recent rise in inflation. When it comes time to refinance the national debt, which happens every 2 or 3 years, it will be refinanced at much higher rates, even as much as 3 times as high. Second, a lot more baby boomers have moved out of the workforce and onto the roles of the entitlement programs. That means they will no longer be contributing to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and will begin taking money out of those programs. It's for precisely that reason that the Social Security Trust Fund goes completely bust in 9 short years. In fact, if you look at the CBO's fiscal projections over the next 10 years, we'll be adding another $20 trillion to the national debt, which will bring us to around $51 trillion by the year 2033. And what are the principal drivers of the national debt over that time frame? You guessed it, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We have simply promised way more than we can deliver under today's tax rates. In other words, to pay for these 3 entitlement programs, which, by the way, we're required to pay for by law, the country needs huge infusions of cash. But politicians lack the willpower to either reform these programs or raise the revenue necessary to fully fund them. So we're likely to continue to add to the national debt over the next decade. So for those naysayers, detractors, and haters who call me out for making a false prediction about the increase in tax rates, all I have to say is this. When tax rates do eventually go up, and they'll have to around the year 2030, they'll go up even higher than they would have had we acted sensibly back in 2013 when I originally wrote The Power of Zero. And as I've said in other videos, tax rates will soon have to rise to 50% to pay for our fiscal mismanagement. In fact, our taxes will be just as high as socialist countries like Denmark. Except the difference will be what you and I get in exchange for those 50% tax rates. While Denmark gets universal health care, paid maternal leave, paid sick leave, and massive social safety nets for their 50%, you know what we'll be spending that money on? Interest on the national debt. One other observation. If you executed a Roth conversion back in 2013, prior to the Trump tax cuts in 2018, does that mean you made a bad financial move? After all, the reason why you did that Roth conversion was because you thought that tax rates would be higher in the future. And here we are 10 years later and taxes are actually lower. The answer is you still made a sound financial move. You see, your retirement will still likely last another 20 to 40 years, depending on where you are in your retirement journey. That means that you still have another 20 to 40 years to see whether that Roth conversion move was the right one. And it's mathematically impossible for taxes to not go up during that 20 to 40 year time period. So just because taxes haven't gone up over the last 10 years doesn't mean that the Power of Zero paradigm is for naught. It just means that 10 years from now, taxes will have to go even higher. And the 0% tax bracket will be all the more important to your retirement plan. In summary, the best explanation for why experts have been predicting higher tax rates and tax rates have gone down is 2 words: Political expediency. Politicians recognize that it's more palatable to voters to raise the national debt than to raise taxes, so they've acted accordingly. However, there will come a point in time beyond which politicians can no longer procrastinate raising taxes. And that day of reckoning will come when the cost of servicing the national debt constrains them to do so. So what does the next 10 years hold? I predict an extension of the Trump tax cuts for the middle class, which will, of course, exacerbate the national debt. But then I predict a day of reckoning on or around 2030 when tax rates will shoot through the roof to pay for everything that we promised that we can't afford to deliver under today's tax rates. What should you do in the meantime if you have the lion's share of your retirement assets sitting in tax-deferred accounts like 401ks and IRAs? Now is the time to take advantage of historically low tax rates to get those assets shifted to tax-free. Do all the shifting now while taxes are low so that by the time they double, you have done all the heavy lifting and can take those dollars out 100% tax-free. Make it your goal to get to the 0% tax bracket by 2030. Why is the 0% tax bracket so important? Because if tax rates double, 2 times 0 is still 0. If you want to learn more about how to shield your hard-earned retirement savings from the impact of higher taxes, be sure to check out my tax-free toolkit. You can download it for free at taxfreetoolkit.com. If you're a financial professional and want to learn how to become a certified Power Zero advisor, head over to powerzero.com and opt into my free 3-part video series. By the way, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them into the comments section below. I respond to every single one of them personally. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a video. This is David McKnight. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.